In the last video, we took a look at creating a brand new document to a specific size, and then we looked at how to place an image into the new document, and we're going to use that new image as a background. We've got the document open here, and we're ready to add some new content. To take a look at the document that we're going to create, I'll just come across and click on the open document I've got here. So this is a JPEG. We'll be adding this box, this transparent box in the background, and then we'll take a look at adding some text and then an Illustrator graphic, a vector graphic. We'll drop that in to the document as well. So I'll just come back across and click on the untitled document that we're working on here. Now I want to save this, so I'll come up to my file menu and come down to save as, and then I'll just navigate to where I want to save this, which is right where I am at the moment. I'll just call this Stay Curious. And we're just saving it as a Photoshop file, just the native Photoshop file format. So I'll hit save on there. Okay, so to start with, we're going to create a colored rectangle that we'll use in the background, and we'll change its transparency, and we'll take a look at how to do that using our layers panel there on the right. So to create a block of color, I can come across to my toolbar, and I've got my shapes that are listed here at the bottom of the toolbar. Now the first one is my rectangle tool, so I'm going to select that one, and before I draw the rectangle, I can come up to the top here and decide on what sort of properties the rectangle will have. Now you can see here I've got the option to fill it with a particular color, and I can also put a stroke or a frame around the shape. I don't want any color for the frame, so I'll just leave it set to this red diagonal line here for no color for the stroke. But then for the fill, I'll click on that, and I can choose from a number of swatches that are listed here. I've also got some recently used colors, or I can create my own swatch by clicking on the little color picker here. And then that just opens up this color picker window, and I can drag this slider along to choose a particular hue, so I can take it up into the blues, and then I could choose a bright blue, or I could desaturate it by coming across to the whites, or I could choose a darker blue by coming down into the dark area down here. I can also hover over my photo as well, and notice that my icon turns into a little eyedropper, and I can click anywhere on here and it will pick up the color of the pixel that I've clicked on. I might use that one. So I'll click OK, and that's now added that here to my fill color. Okay, so to draw out a rectangle on my canvas, I'm just going to click and hold and drag that out across the width of the canvas. So now that I've drawn that, I can move that shape around using my Move tool in the toolbar. So I'll come up and I'll click on the Move tool at the top of the toolbar, and we can see that I've got my transform controls on. We can see that that's on up here in the control panel, and that allows me to change the size of this rectangle if I wanted to change its width and height. And I can also click within the rectangle now to move it around. You can see that as I'm moving that, it's got these smart guides that are showing up, and that's telling me that that is now centered in the middle of my canvas, and I'll leave it there. If I'm happy with that transformation of the size, I can then come up and I can commit to that transformation by clicking on my little tick symbol there. Great, so now that I've got the rectangle in place, I want to take a look now at my layers panel over here on the right hand side, and we can see that it's automatically created a new layer for that rectangle, and I want to change the opacity of this so that I can see some of the stars through the rectangle. So I've got my opacity level there. It's currently at 100%, but then I'll just drag that down to about 70%, and I'll leave it at 70% opacity. Great, so now I can create some text to go over the top of this. So I'll come across to my type tool and click on the T there for type, and then I'll just click onto the page, and when I do that, you can see that it's automatically created a brand new layer for this text. So I'll just type in my text. Now with that text, I'm going to select it by dragging my type tool across it, and then I've got the properties up here in the control panel for my text. I'm going to choose a typeface from the top here, and it has my most recently used fonts. So I'm going to use Brie in this case. So I've also got the size here, which I can choose from, or I can type in my own size. I might take this up to 90 points in size. Often with text, it's a good idea to try some of the different filters that Photoshop has to run over the top of text, and you'll find that sometimes the text displays much clearer on certain types of filters. It really depends on the font that you're using. I think I'll stick with smooth in this case. Okay, so now I'm going to move this text a little bit further down on the canvas, so I'll grab my Move tool. So I'll move this down, and just position it at the top of my rectangle so that I've got enough room for the text underneath. Now I'm actually going to duplicate this layer and just change the text. So in order to duplicate, I can come across to my layers panel and I can actually drag this layer down onto my new layer button there. That's one way to duplicate a layer. And if I come across and hold down the Option key on a Mac or Alt on PC, I get this double arrow, and then I can click and drag that down. I'll hold Shift as well, which will keep it perfectly in alignment underneath. And I've now got a copy here of that layer. So to change that text, I'll just grab my type tool and select that text and just put in some new text there. And then I can do Control or Command A to select all of the text, and then come up and I'll choose a different size for this text. I'll come down to 48 points in size. Okay, then I'll just move this text across here, and then I might select this text, pull it down a little bit. And I've left some room here because I'm going to place in another graphic. So the graphic that I'll bring in is actually in Illustrator, a vector file, and I'm going to place that by going up to the File menu and choosing to Place Embedded from here. And then I'll just navigate to where that's saved. There it is there, .ai file format. So I'll place that and I'll choose to drop it in as a page. And then I'll just scale that down. So grabbing the corner here, holding Shift as I do that, just to keep the proportions. And then moving that across. And I can also hover just in the corner of this outside of the bounding box and rotate that. Once I've positioned that, I can then come up and click Commit to that transform. Excellent. So we can see now that we've got this stacking order with our layers. So whatever's sitting at the top currently sits in front. So at the moment, the Stay Creative text is at the top of the stack, and then I've got Stay Curious, my rocket, and then my rectangle color, and then I've got the original image that I dropped in. I can turn the visibility of these layers on and off just by clicking on my little eye icon there. And I can also change the order of these around just by clicking and dragging them. So for example, with the rocket, if I wanted to put that behind the rectangle, I could just click and hold down and drag it and drop it underneath the rectangle. We can see that it's now gone blue there, so you can see it through the rectangle. If I wanted to bring it to the top of the stack, I can just click and drag, and we see that I'm able to drop that on top of all of the text and all the other elements on the page. We can also lock our layers in place if we want to. You've got a little padlock here. When you've got a layer selected, if we click on that, we can see that that's now locked. And so if I was to try and move that around, I'm not going to grab the rocket. Instead, I'll grab another element that's around or behind the rocket. And finally with this, what I'll do is I'll save this file as a JPEG, and we can do that a couple of ways. One way is through the export option. So if I come up to the File menu, and then come down where I've got my export, and then I'll save for web. So I'll click on that and it'll open up my save for web preview. You can actually choose to view the document in 4 separate windows, and you can compare your original to some other versions of the file. I'm just going to stick with this version up here in the top right corner, which is set as my JPEG at a maximum quality. I can also check here how large that is, currently 336 kilobytes. So I'll come down here, click on Save there, and then I'll just save this into the Task Files folder. Great, so I've now saved a copy of this file as a JPEG, and I've also got my PSD file, which is my fully editable file that has all of the layers in place. Now that we've had a look at creating a document made up of multiple layers, we'll take a look at the next video where we'll explore selections and how you can select certain parts of your layers in order to edit them. See you in the next video.